All right, good evening, Pittsburgh Unified School District and community members. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're going to wait a minute as I see participants are still entering, so we'll give it just about a minute. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for our early literacy workshop. All right, I see we still have participants entering. We'll give it a little bit more. All right. All right, good evening, parents and families. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Leticia Preciado, and I'm the Parent Engagement Coordinator here in Pittsburgh Unified. Joining me this evening is Ms. Janet Rivera, Director of the First 5 office here in Pittsburgh, and also Ms. Marika Hines, Community Resource Specialist, also from the First 5 office here in Pittsburgh. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. All right, so we are in a webinar style format, so we're able to hear you or see you. So during the presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to place your questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring your questions throughout the presentation. There'll also be times throughout the presentation when we may ask you some questions and ask you to place your responses in the chat as well. We are recording this evening's session, so you can refer to it later. And then feel free to share the recording also with other members of the community so that they can also enjoy the information. At the end of tonight's session, we'll fill out a short survey to be sure that all of our participants joining us this evening receive their books for their child. And then we'll also have an opportunity drawing at the end for all of our participants who complete the exit survey. All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, can you see it okay? Yes, okay, great. All right, so again, welcome and thank you for joining us for this evening's early literacy workshop. This week's focus is going to be on oral language, and this is a collaboration between Pittsburgh Unified and the First 5 office here in Pittsburgh. All right, and so there are 4 predictors known to predict later reading achievement: oral language, alphabet awareness, phonemic awareness, and concepts about print and reading fluency. Today we'll be focusing on the first one, oral language. So oral language is the ability to understand language at a listening and speaking level. At a listening level, it's also known as receptive language, which basically refers to how your child understands language. So receptive language is the understanding of information provided in a variety of ways, such as sounds and words, movements and gestures, and signs and symbols. And children often acquire elements of receptive language way faster than their expressive language. If you think about when you have a little young toddler who's like 1 or 2, they can understand a lot more when we're talking to them than they can verbalize at that age. So their receptive language is typically larger when they're younger. And some examples of receptive language include following simple multi-step directions, such as stand up, push your chair in, and go to the door, or answering comprehension questions based on a picture or a story. So when we're reading a story, for example, we can stop and ask, what do you think the character will do next? And that gives your child an opportunity to use their oral language. And that to see, gain their understanding, see if they understood what we asked. Expressive language, on the other hand, is language on a speaking level, or what the child is able to verbalize or express. So expressive language is our ability to communicate our thoughts and feelings through our words, gestures, signs, and symbols. And talking is the main form of communication that we tend to think of when we talk about expressive language, because it's the most common, but there are other types of communication, such as sign language as well. All right. And so, excuse me, give me 1 second. So tonight, let me go back 1 slide. Tonight, we're going to be talking a lot about different strategies. One of the main things we want to make sure is that as you're using these strategies, that you're interacting with your child in a very fun way. It doesn't have to be like a sit-down lesson. We're going to talk a lot about how you can embed these strategies into your daily routine. And some of the great ways your child can develop his or her receptive and expressive language is through joint attention. And so joint attention is when you're having a discussion around something, when you're joining your attention to an item or thing. So like when you're reading a book, for example, you both have joint attention, you're both looking at the book, you're talking about that book, and that gives your child an opportunity to practice both their expressive and receptive language. Play is another great opportunity when young children can develop their both the receptive and expressive language because they're participating in different types of play, and play routines allow children to understand not only their environment in different ways, but also gives an opportunity to use language and social skills, of course. And keep in mind that for young children, play is the best way for them to learn. Also daily routines, whether at school, if your child's already in school, or at home, having consistent routines throughout the day provide your children with a predictable schedule, which allows them to better understand and use language that's appropriate for that situation. And it exposes children to a consistent set of words in that familiar context. And for really young children, you can use visual cues to go with daily routines, such as pictures of what the steps are, such as if you have a daily routine for, say, the evening, getting ready for bed, you can have a visual for taking a bath, putting on the pajamas, and then brushing their teeth. And then, so as they build their expressive language, they also, the visuals help with the receptive as well. All right, and there's a critical period for language development from birth to 7 years of age. So the first few years of life is when the brain is developing and maturing, and it's the most intensive period for acquiring speech and language skills. And these skills develop the best in a world that's very rich with sounds and sights and consistent exposure to the speech and language of others. And so if you're familiar with the first 5 commercials, that's why you often hear sing to your child, talk to your child, play with your child, right? Because those early years are so critical. It's the early years when the brain is developing the most. And so really everything we're doing in our interactions and our conversations with our children is critical, and it's within this critical period of language as well. All right, now we're gonna take a moment to watch a short video. So let me stop sharing my screen. Thank you for your patience. Give me one moment. All right, can you see the screen okay? Yes, okay, yep. Great. All right.
Think about how much reading you do in a day. You read the newspaper, emails, street signs, and directions. Reading is critical to academic success, economic opportunities, and quality of life. Alarmingly, research has demonstrated that a first grader who is a poor reader at the end of the school year has an 88% chance of remaining a poor reader at the end of 4th grade. Subsequently, there is a 74% probability of a poor reader at the end of 4th grade remaining a poor reader throughout his or her academic career. That's why your role is so vital. You will help young learners get on the road to reading success. Welcome, my name is Vanessa. In 3 videos, you'll learn about 3 foundational literacy skills: oral language, phonological awareness, and letter recognition. Before we begin, make sure that you have downloaded the handout. Let's begin. There are 2 components of reading: decoding and language comprehension. Decoding is translating symbols on a page into words. In other words, to be skilled readers, students need to instantly recognize words. Language comprehension, which we'll refer to as oral language, is the focus of this video. Oral language is understanding language at a listening and speaking level. Now I'm going to introduce a few activities for developing oral language. The first activity is naming. Naming involves your students naming items related to different topics and categories. By naming items and categories, you help the students organize their language for better retrieval. You might have your students name fruits. For example, have them name fruits that are red, fruits that are green, and fruits that are yellow. Your students could name fruits that are big and round, and fruits that are small and round. You want to keep the naming brisk. If your students can't name many items in a category, you name some items and have them repeat as many as they can remember. Choose a topic for naming that coordinates with the book you're reading with your students.
Let's name some berries.
Raspberry, blueberry, boysenberry,
Good job. Let's name some melons.
watermelon, cantaloupe,
Honeydew?
honeydew, yeah.
I'm going to say a sentence and I want you to repeat it after me. An apple is red and a plum is purple.
An apple is red and a plum is purple.
Good. Now you try a sentence.
An orange is orange and an apple is red.
Good job.
Another activity that builds oral language is dialogic reading. Dialogic reading means that as you read to a student, you want to have discussions or dialogues with him or her. You do this by asking your students simple questions and by adding information to their responses. You can use dialogic reading as you read books with your students. Dialogic reading looks like this.
Do you know what this book is about?
A bug.
A bug? Yeah, actually a caterpillar. Have you ever heard of a caterpillar?
Mm-hmm.
What is it?
It's a bug that's hairy
You're right, it's hairy and it's really long.
and it has 6 feet and 12 eyes.
Well, based on what you know about insects, what do you think this caterpillar might eat?
Leaves,
Maybe some leaves? So he might see other things other than leaves that he wants to eat. What else do you think he might eat besides leaves?
like berries.
Maybe some berries too. So what do you think this story is about, or what did you learn about it?
It's hairy, it's long, it has 6 legs and 12 eyes.
All right, good job.
Yes, success. Here's a mnemonic to help you remember the steps. Peer, P-E-E-R. P is for prompt. E is for evaluate. The second E is for extend. R is for repeat. Students in the early grades need a strong oral language base so they can understand the words they are reading. In short, the value of oral language development is priceless.
So we're going to review what peer means. So P is for prompt, E is for evaluate, E is for extend, R is for repeat. So prompt is like us by when we're talking to children or reading a book, we're asking them by open-ended questions and having them to be able to answer their questions besides saying yes or no, just giving them the opportunity to share more about what was read or seen. Evaluate is to kind of understand what they knew, what they heard from the story, from reading it. Kind of you're asking further questions for them to see what they have learned. And to extend is by asking them further questions of what they read. So if we ask them what a caterpillar might eat, they may tell us, oh, they eat bugs or fruit. What kind of fruits do you like? And so that's kind of extending the questions. And we want to repeat. She stated the sentence and he repeated it. So you can always also repeat new vocabulary words as you encounter them in the text or in your dialogue or discussion. So even if there's a new word that they're hearing, it's always good to repeat it and for them to understand, to be able to associate it with something. So like cantaloupe may be a big word for children to say. So if we show them a picture of what a cantaloupe is, then they can associate the word cantaloupe with the picture. Next slide, please. And this is one of the games that she mentioned, you know, what types of berries. So if we ask our children what types of berries, they may be able to tell you, you know, strawberry, blueberry, raspberry, blackberry, and cranberry. So it's just making it fun for them to be able to categorize things that they already see every day at home. So here's a question. In the chat, can you please tell me what types of transportation is available to us? Car, cars, bus, BART, yes, bike, train, plane, airplane, walking, bus, cars, and bikes. These are some great answers. Scooter, a van, airplane, helicopter, truck. These are great. Thank you everybody for participating. So these are questions, these are fun ways to ask our children while we're walking around or taking going to the grocery store in the car and asking them what types of transportation do we see? And they could tell you like just what we did. They'll give us all this information. And sometimes if it's their first time understanding, transportation is a big word. So you may want to say, remember when we go to grandma, what type of, how do we get there? And so they'll tell you car. And so it's easy to kind of help them start to associate the word with something that they already know. Next slide. And now we want to be able to help them decode, so translate the symbols on the pages in the word to instantly recognize the words. So helping them understand that there's letters associated with pictures or words that are attached to a picture, and that helps them to see that they're able to translate in a way that the symbol is associated with the word. And then we want to language comprehension is understanding the language at a listening receptive. So being able to understand what is being said, and then speaking is expressing it. So understanding what is being said, like when she asked them to say a sentence, like she says the apple is red, or you can say an orange is orange. So helping them understand that being the words are associated with pictures or objects or anything that's very tangible to them. And then dialogic reading is as you read with your child, you want to have a discussion or a dialogue with him by asking questions, preferably open-ended, and adding information to their responses. So being able to ask them questions while you're reading. So maybe asking them, what do you think is going to happen next? Or what do you see on this picture? And so sometimes just even those small questions will help them associate the words on the page.
All right, so you saw as in the video, she used some open-ended questions. And so let me go back and first, and in the chat, if you can type, what is an open-ended question? What do you think? What's an open-ended question versus a closed question? If you can put your answers in the chat, and then Janet and Marika, if you could help me out and see what comes through the chat. What is an open-ended question compared to a closed question? And why do we use it?
Okay, so one question says, where did the story take place?
That's an example.
As an example.
Mhm.
And then someone says that doesn't have a specific answer. Close is yes or no answers. What was the book about? They're coming in so quick. Open-ended question gives room to provide different answers versus yes or no, which closes the question. Tell me what did you see that you like?
Awesome. Those are all great answers. Thank you. So yes, open-ended questions are designed to encourage a full, meaningful answer using the child's own individual knowledge and or their feelings. And it's definitely where the answer is very likely going to need more than a one-word response, more than a yes or no, or more than a one-word response. Like if we ask them, what color is the ball? They're more likely just going to look at the ball and tell you what color it is, like red. But if we say, wow, look at the ball, I wonder what you notice about it. And then they can look at it and see, oh, there's a design on it, there's a caricature on it. And they can start talking to you about that. So how we ask questions, closed questions are not bad. It's just we want to use more open-ended questions because it allows your child to use their critical thinking and definitely practice using their oral language. So we definitely want to use more open-ended questions and in our conversations with our children, and especially when we're reading books. So for example, in the video of the Very Hungry Caterpillar, you saw she was using that book. She asked him how many, if she were to ask him, how many eyes does the caterpillar have in this illustration? He could look at the illustration and just, look and see that there's two. It's very likely that he's going to say two. But if she were to ask, what do you notice about the caterpillar's head? Then he might come up with a varied amount of responses. Well, in this head, he has two eyes. He looks like he has antenna. The eyes look really large. So who knows? They have to look at the illustration, think critically, and then use their expressive language to come up with their answer, right? Whereas in a closed question, again, it's just a one-word response. And so we really want to make sure that when we're reading with our kids or just having conversations with them, that we're using those open-ended questions. And books, and when we're reading books, it's a great opportunity to do that. And so some questions you might do before reading are, what do you notice about the illustrations on the cover? And then that's also a great way so that they can look at the illustration and then kind of think about what is that book going to be about. So you can ask, what do you think the book is going to be about? Just by looking at the illustrations. And then when they answer you, you can follow it up with another open-ended question by saying, what makes you think that? And then they're going to give you more language, practice their oral language, answering why they think that. While reading, some examples could be, what do you notice is happening on this page? Or what do you think might happen next? Or if you're running across a word that you're not sure if your child knows, and maybe it's a new vocabulary word for them, you can ask, I wonder what that word means. And then when they answer, you can have a conversation about it. And if you don't know the word, you can always say, I wonder where we can find what a word means. Oh yeah, a dictionary. And you can either pull out, the old-fashioned book dictionary or look for it online. But you can also ask them, what do you think that word means? And so it's really important, especially as you're coming across a new vocabulary word, that we stop and define it for them and give them an example, and give them an example that's real world to them. And so as we come across those words, it's really important to stop and have that conversation with their children. After reading, you can ask, what was your favorite part of the story? What happened in the beginning, in the middle, and the end of the story? And just asking those questions at the end also allows your child to start to see that stories have a structure. They have a beginning, a middle, and the end, so they can see that that's consistent in stories as they read. All right, and now Miss Marika is going to read the book for us. And let me stop sharing my screen so she can read the book.
Okay, can you guys see the book? Okay, our book this evening is called This is the Rope, a story from the Great Migration by Jacqueline Woodson, illustrated by James Ransom. Does anyone know what that means if you illustrate a book? And feel free to put it in the chat. Hi guys. Hi Kurt. And yep, feel free to put it in the chat if you know what it means when you illustrated a book. Yeah, you draw the pictures, exactly. Okay, let's get into it. This is the rope my grandmother found beneath an old tree a long time ago back home in South Carolina. This is the rope my grandmother skipped under the shade of a sweet-smelling pine. This is the rope my grandfather used to tie the few things they owned to the top of a car that drove my grandmother, who is a mother now from South Carolina, all along the way to a place called New York City. See them getting in the car? This is the rope my grandmother held tight to as my grandfather drove, real slow past the people and the big city buildings that seemed to go on and on. This is the rope my grandmother used to dry the sweet-smelling flowers she grew in small window boxes, reminding her of the flowers back home, where the land, she said, went on and on and on. This is the rope my grandfather strung so that my mama's diapers could blow dry in the hot city breeze. And this is the rope my mama tied around a small ducky's neck, then pulled it along singing, quack, quack, quack. This is the rope my mama held out to the girls on the block, her new Brooklyn block, a home of their own when they finally owned. Mama asked shyly, anybody want to play? What do you guys think is gonna happen next? Well, Mama's asking some new friends if anyone wants to play. You can put it in the chat. Yeah, they'll play with the rope. Okay, that's a good guess. Let's see. This is the rope my mama first tripped on as she sang with her friends. Miss Lucy had a baby. She named him Tiny Tim. So you were right, she played rope and made lots of friends. That's a good guess. And they're playing together. Good job. This is the rope my mama's brother took from her room for some crazy game that little boys play. This is the rope my mama found again 10 years later when my grandfather said, We need a bit of rope to tie these things down inside this here car, like that rope we used to have from back home. Then he drove with my mama off to a college far away from the city, while up at the window, my grandmother waved. See grandma waving in the window? This is the rope my mama placed on the piano around family photos and me just a baby and then a bit bigger, already reaching for it. This is the rope my daddy used when he showed me the way to tie a sailor's knot. 2 times around and pulled it real tight. You want whatever you make or do in your life, my daddy said, to last. This is the rope my mama turned as she waved to my daddy and taught me to sing the Miss Lucy song out on our sidewalk right here in Brooklyn just last Friday night. Here's our rope again. This is the rope that held up the sign saying we are all family at our picnic reunion in the big park up the street from our home. This is the rope, threadbare and graying, that I traded with grandma for a brand new one. Then I jumped a new jump. My name is Beatrice, and I come from Brooklyn. As my family smiled proudly and the sun began setting, as grandma held on to her rope from back home. And her long ago memory of sweet smelling pine. The end. What was your favorite part of the story? You guys can put it in the chat. A lot happened in the story, right? The family moved, but they kept this rope. So we have when they played jump rope, that was a good part. Making memories. Yeah, it was a lot of memories when they played together with the jump rope. Making friends and how the family kept together and made memories. And she made new friends. Yeah, those are all great parts of the story. Yeah, that's exactly right. The family continued with the rope and they used it in a lot of different ways. Thank you, guys.
All right, and then Marika, if you want to highlight a couple of pages and we can practice doing some open-ended questions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so like with a page like this, we may want to ask, what does it look like is happening in the story? Dad is in the window. Let me try to lower it so we don't get as much of a glare here. Yeah, what do we think is happening in this page if we remember? We see some suitcases. Yep, the family's moving. Yeah, that's a great guess. They're traveling. Yep. They're saying goodbye. Yeah, lots happening in this photo. Family saying bye, and they have their suitcases. That kind of gives us some clues about what's happening. and they're traveling and they're saying goodbye to each other. Okay, let's do another one. Let me try to find the page we didn't look at too long. Let's do on this last one. So here she was jumping with the new rope. What's a good open-ended question you might want to ask about this one? Maybe how many people are there? How do you think the family feels? Yeah, that's a good one. What are they doing? How the girl feels? What happened to the other rope? Yep, that's a good question because she's got the new rope, but there's still the old rope. What is the family looking at? What are they thinking? Yeah, those are all good examples. Jumping with the new rope. How many is a little bit more of a closed because then the child can count how many folks are in there.
Also on that page, it says, this is the rope threadbare and grain. So if you're not sure if your child knows what threadbare and grain, what kind of open-ended question can you ask to make sure they know what that vocabulary word or those vocabulary words are? What could you ask? It says threadbare and grain. You can place your answers in the chat. What do you think? What can you ask to make sure that you know what that means?
What do you think threadbare is? Yeah, that's a good one. And then you can always show the child more of like what it looks like. Grandma's got it in her hand here. What do you think these words mean? Exactly. Yep, that's a good example of a way to ask them. And it's good because they can get some clues by really looking at the jump rope, the old jump rope. So it can give them some context clues about what threadbare could mean. Those are good examples of questions. Okay.
Can you see the screen okay?
Yes. So here are some activities that you can do while you're out and about grocery shopping or running errands. When you visit a park, you want to ask, what do you see around you? You know, you'll at a park, you see so many things, and maybe something simple is to pick up some leaves and you want to compare the shapes of the leaves or compare the types of trees. You know, there's big trees, small trees, skinny trees, big trees, and you want to compare the bark on the trees too, so that they can touch it and feel it. And, you know, some trees feel soft and some feel bumpy or rough. So you want to be able to go at the park and be able to do different activities. Leaves are the easiest to do because you're able to pick them up and ask questions, what shape they are, what colors do you see, and the sizes are different, the shapes, the cutouts are also different. So doing simple tasks like that and creating that type of vocabulary helps the children understand the the words associated with stuff that they see in real life. Next slide. And then you want to be able to extend their learning. So you'll want to talk about what does a leaf need to grow, or what does a plant need to grow, and how are there different leaves for different plants. Their shapes are different, their veins are different. And so we encourage you to visit the local library to get more books on trees, do some research online. You can do different activities looking at the types of trees, types of leaves, how trees grow. Some trees need more water than others, some need more sunlight, some don't. So helping them create a different little activity that they can do so that they're able to do something fun while learning different ways of extending their learning after reading a book. Maybe like there's a book called Going on a Leaf Hunt. So maybe you want to go on a leaf hunt yourself and look for books. And here's an example of a leaf rub activity as an art project. You want to look at different, you can do matching or sorting of the leaves. As your child gets older, you can do a scavenger hunt and they can look for the different types of leaves. You can look at leaves and even label them, and the maple, oak, and grass, so they can start seeing and matching it as well. So there's different things that we can do outside of our home to do that, building that oral language for them.
All right, so these are the California Common Core reading standards for literature for first grade. And although most of you probably have a younger child, either preschool, TK, or kinder, I wanted you to see how the strategies that we're discussing today can help your child reach those standards by the time he or she becomes a first grader. So in the first one, you'll see asking and answering questions about key details. And that can be done simply when we're reading a book with our children, asking them what was their favorite part of the story, what happened at the beginning, what happened in the middle, what happened in the end. So that, again, they can understand that all stories have that structure, and they can begin to practice talking about that and using their expressive language. Retelling the story and key details of the story, identifying who is telling the story at various points in a text. So for example, in a book like The Three Little Bears, I think we're all familiar with that, The Three Little Bears story about the mama bear, papa bear, and a baby bear, and how they made porridge and it was too hot, so they went on a walk. And so using that as an example, you can have different discussions and questions to ask your child, who do they think is telling the story, right? And then you can use clues, whether it's the clues are words in the book, the text, or actually clues in the visuals, in the illustrations of the book as well, to get them to see who's the one telling the story. So it's baby bear that's telling the story. And then using illustrations and details in a story to describe its characters, its settings, or event. So using that same example of The Three Little Bears, you can point out an illustration in the book and say, and ask your child, maybe, look at baby bear's face in this illustration. What do you think he might be feeling after someone ate his porridge and broke his chair? And they could use those clues in the illustrations to help infer how the baby bear is feeling. So you can use illustrations in the book also to see what the setting is. So in that example, it's in the woods. So just by looking at the illustrations, you can also tell what the setting is. And then lastly, confirming predictions about what will happen next in a text. And you can do this simply by asking your child what he or she thinks will happen next. And then once the child answers, you can continue to develop their oral language by asking, what makes you think that? For example, if you were to ask, what do you think might happen next? And your child says, I think Little Bear is going to find who ate his porridge and who broke his chair. You can then ask, what makes you think he's going to find out who ate his porridge and who broke his chair? What makes you think that? And then he or she has to think about what you're asking and then use their expressive language to respond. All right. All right, so these are California Common Core reading standards for informational text, again, for first grade. But again, you can see how the different strategies that we're discussing, how it can help your child to reach those strategies, to reach those Common Core reading standards by the time they do become first graders. So asking and answering questions to help determine or clarify the meaning of a word or phrase. You saw when we came across that word threadbare, how you can use an open-ended question to find out if they knew what that meant. And they can look at the illustration to really see what that older rope looked like. You can also, again, use a dictionary. And then distinguishing between information provided by pictures or other illustrations and information provided by the words in a text. So they can receive information in both. And in young children's book, there's text, but the illustrations often tend to give more information. So drawing your child's attention to that is also key. And again, using the illustrations and details in a text to describe its key ideas. All right, so earlier in the presentation, we watched a short 5-minute video. And in that video, she mentioned how a first grader who is a poor reader at the end of the school year, at the end of their first grade year, has an 88% chance of remaining a poor reader by the end of 4th grade, and a 74% chance by the end of his or her academic career. So you can see how critical these early years really are. Preschool, TK, kindergarten, and first grade, and even before preschool. In these early years, the foundation is being set in the area of reading, writing, math, language. And so for children who have, if they're already in school and if they're missing a lot of school, it can impact them because they're missing pieces of that curriculum that's setting the foundation for them. Again, because these early years are so crucial to their long-term academic success. So that's where you come in, their parents, their families. Parents, you play a huge role, a key role in your child's academic success. So establishing a fun reading time with your child every day can not only help your child develop his or her language, but it can also help your child become a stronger reader and open up a whole new world through books, right? Because when they're, especially as they get a little older and they become really strong readers, and then they start doing chapter books, there's a whole world that can open up in their imagination as there's less and less pictures and more text, and they have to use their imagination to imagine what those characters might look like. So in this visual, you can see that simply by reading 1 minute a day with your child can be exposed to 8,000 words over the course of a whole school year. And then if you add 4 more minutes with a total of 5 minutes a day, your child can be exposed to 282,000 words over the course of a school year. And then finally, if you read 20 minutes each day with your child, that's the goal, 15 to 20 minutes a day, your child could be exposed to 1,800,000 words over the course of a school year. So you can see that the more that we read with our children, the more likely it is they're going to have a larger vocabulary. They're going to have opportunities to practice their receptive language and their expressive language. All right. And then before we go answer your questions, I'm going to, if Ms. Marika, if you can put the link in the chat for our exit survey. And then we encourage you to please take a moment to fill it out. And then we'll also take a few minutes to answer your questions. And we're going to have an opportunity to join in just a few minutes as people want to give all of you an opportunity to complete the survey. And then again, I just want to stress that the more engaging and fun you have with the activities and reading the book, the better. If you're having fun as a parent, then your child's going to have fun. You never want reading to be like a chore, like, oh, come on, we have to read. No one say, woohoo, let's go read a book, right? And when they're really young, they're very likely going to want to read that same book over and over and over again. And we might want to read another book, but they want to read that same one. It's okay, right? We can continue to read that book, and we can come up, since they really like it, look at the book and find out what parts of the book can we use to make different activities. Like you saw earlier, the book was about going on a leaf hunt, and then the activities were tied to that book. So if your child has a favorite book or just favorite things that he or she likes, then look for different books around that topic. So if your child is just obsessed with, loves fire trucks and loves firefighters, right? You can go to the library and check out a whole bunch of books, and some fiction and nonfiction, right? So you can see just a lot of fun stories and how the illustrations from book to book, from books to books are different. You can check out some books that show real fire trucks and uses, and it has vocabulary that describes the different parts of that fire truck. You can even take a visit to your local fire station. You might have to plan that a little bit in advance, but really take what your child loves and enjoys and have conversations about it. Check out different books at the library. If you can plan activities around what they like, plan visits around what they like as well. That all of that combined is going to allow your child to really, really develop their oral language, both receptive and expressive.